Hey there, how is it going everyone? In this video, we are going to be building a simple REST API and implementing JWT authentication. So I'm going to start from scratch and we're going to go on building step by step until we have a complete API with JWT authentication. In this case, I'm not going to use a database. I'm just going to use an in-memory database, which is this, and we're going to be using the FastAPI JWT authentication extension, which borrows its philosophy from the flask-jwt-extended extension for Flask. So let's get started with doing this. So I'm going to start by creating the virtual environment. So to do that, I'm going to start by creating the virtual environment with Python -m, and then I'm going to call venv, and then I'm going to call my virtual environment env. This is going to create the virtual environment within our folder. And this is where I'm going to install all the required dependencies for this project. Now, when this is done, I'm going to activate it and then install FastAPI and UVCon. Then we'll go ahead and create the different routes that we need for this project. Now, since this is done, I'm going to activate this virtual environment with source, env, scripts, and activate. After activating this, I'm going to run pip install. I'm going to install FastAPI and UVCon. So FastAPI is a framework we're going to use, and UVCon is what is going to help us to run our code. We're going to use it as our server for our. Let's wait for this to get finished installing. Now, after this installing, the next thing is going to be to create our simple. I'm going to first freeze our requirements to our requirements.txt file, and the next thing is going to be to create our simple file that's going to contain our routes. So to do that, I'm going to just say pip freeze, and then I'll freeze requirements.txt. This is going to create a requirements.txt file, just like you see it here. It's going to write every requirement for this project. Now, after doing that, the next thing is going to be to create our file where we're going to write our code. So I'm going to create that and just going to simply call it. Sorry for this. I'm just going to click here and create a main.py file. When I create that, I'm going to call this file main.py. So to start our project, I'm going to first import FastAPI. So I'm going to say from the FastAPI package, we're going to import FastAPI, and when you import FastAPI, we're going to create an instance of FastAPI. So to do this, I'm going to create an app, and then app variable will be equal to the FastAPI instance. After doing this, I'll create the various routes that we're going to use for this project. Now to do this, I'm going to create the first route as so. We're going to need basically routes that are going to create new users, routes that are going to log in users, and the other routes that will be used for the JWT authentication. So let's try to do this. I'm going to create the first route, which is going to be a simple dummy route. So I'm going to just call this hello. So I'm just going to call slash. It's going to be at the root of our project. So it's going to be the simple route. So this is going to just call it index. I'm going to just test our app. So I'm just going to call this index, and it's just going to return a simple message. So I'm going to return a dictionary message, and this message is going to be hello. Now, after doing this, I'll simply run our app. So I'm just going to say UVCon. So we're using UVCon. So I'll say UVCon, and then I'll specify the name of the file, and then the app instance, which is app. Then I'll specify that we want our app to reload. This is going to run our app and reload it every time we shall be saving the changes to our code. So I'm going to resume and go. I'm using Insomnia as my texting tool, so I'll go to my dashboard and create a new request collection. So I'm going to create a new request collection for this tutorial. Let me just call it JWT in this case. And when I call it JWT, the next thing is going to be to call that simple request. So when I call that simple request, I'm going to just say this is going to be hello. I'm going to call it hello. It's going to be a get request. Just going to go to localhost. Going to be 8000, and to the root of our URL when we send, our message is being returned as hello. Now I'm going to implement other route. In this case, we're going to have a sign up route, which is going to help us to create users. and the login route that will help us to create JWT tokens. So let's try to do this. So I'm going to come and create. The first thing I'll have to do is to create a model, which is going to be for a user. So we expect that we're going to be having a user model by Pydantic. We're going to create one using Pydantic, and it will help us to serialize every user we shall be creating. So to do that, I'm going to import this model from Pydantic. So I'm going to say from Pydantic, I'm going to import the base model class. When I import the base model class, the next thing is going to be to create our user model. I'm going to create the user model. I'm just going to come and say class. Then this is going to be our user. Then this user is going to have a username. Let's say we're going to have a username. Our username, which is going to be a string. And then they're also going to have, let's say, an email, which is also going to be a string. They are going to also have a password. So this password is also going to be a string. We may also pass in other optional configurations that are going to help us when we're using our Swagger API or when we are doing other things on the Swagger API. So to do that, I'm going to create a simple class which is going to be called config. This config class is going to contain certain attribute called a schema extra. So this will basically help to dictate what we have to put input into our schema, the Swagger UI. I'm going to do this and say this is going to be a dictionary and it's going to have an example. So this is the example that will be displayed on the Swagger UI. So this example will be a dictionary and it will have whatever we shall have to pass in as the body. So I'll say username, be a username. So let's just call this John Doe, and then our email be simple email. Let's say John Doe at gmail.com. Now the next thing is going to be our password. So just say password. So this is also going to be a key, which is password. Sorry for this. So it's going to be our password, and then the value of this will also be password. After this is done, we are going to be able to sign up our users. So to do that, I'm going to create a simple list that's going to act as our database for users. I'm going to create a list which is going to be users, and it's going to be a simple list. And this is going to be where we're going to keep each user we're going to keep. Now keep in mind that we're using an in-memory database, and this in-memory database gets wiped every time we are to reload our application. So let's go ahead and try to implement that. So we need to come and say at app dot, so this is going to be post since we are creating a new user. Now what you shall require is the body, and the body will be serialized as a user. So I'll say user is going to be the type user, the user model that we've been able to create, and all we expect is to create a user from this. One thing we've done is we've done a mistake here. This is supposed to be our route, so I'm going to call it it's going to be users. So we're going to make a post request to users so as to create a new user, or we can even instead call it sign up route, and this is going to just have our users being created. So we shall create a view function, and let's say it's going to be to create an account or to create a user. And for this, we shall pass in the user and the user model. Since we are using Pydantic in this case, so we're going to use the Pydantic model we created. And after doing this, the next thing is going to be to create a new user. So we're going to create a new user. It's going to be a dictionary. So this dictionary is going to be in this form. It's going to have a username, which is going to be the username we get from the body of the request. So that is going to be user.username. And then the next thing we're going to create is the email. So we're going to say the email in this case is going to be, so this is going to be our email. So it's going to be user.email. And the next thing is going to be our password. So I'm going to create this and say password. And this is going to be our user.password. So after doing this, this is the dictionary. It's going to contain our user. Next thing is going to be to save it to our dummy list of users. So to do that, I'm going to just say users dot append, since it's a list. then we shall just append our new user. So we're having our new user. And after doing this, the next thing is going to be to just return that user and the status code of 201 to show that we've created that user. I'm going to just say we are going to return the new user we've created. And after doing this, the next thing is going to be to return a status. So I'm just going to come within our route and then say that our status code in this case is going to be 201. That's in case the request is successful. So we are going to also create a route that's going to show us a list of users. And after creating them, so I'm going to come just down here and create that. So I'm going to say, I'm actually going to comment this. So I'm going to comment this and say this is going to be creating user. So in this case, the next route, I'm going to write a comment above it, and this is going to be for getting all users. So I'm going to call this app.get, and it's going to be slash users, and then we shall have to pass in the Pydantic model as our response model. So what I'll say is response model is going to be list, then this is going to be our model. In this case, it's going to be the user model. So after this, I'm going to import the list type from typing. So I'm going to go up in our code, import that. So I'm going to say from typing, we are going to import list. After doing that, that means that we are going to return our model as a list, and that is what we shall expect from this request. So I'm going to create a view function, and this view function is going to be returning our users. I'm going to call this get users. And then this is just simply going to return a list of users. So to do this, I'm going to come and say return our users. So this is just simply going to return our dummy database of users, which is the list of users. So I'm going to save this, and our server is going to reload. However, we see that we are having an error. So we are saying that main.user is a valid, check that main.user is a valid Pydantic field type. So we're going to go and check this. So if I go to our user model, we are having our user model. It's supposed to inherit from base model, and I forgot that. Let me fix it. So I'm going to say going to inherit from the base model. When I save this, our server has to reload, so we have no errors. So when I go to our Isomia, I'm going to test two routes, one that creates users and one that gets users. So to do that, I'm going to come and create a new request. So this new request is going to be for create a user. So we're going to call this a get post request. So this is going to be a post request. Now we're going to create a new user. So we need a request body. We're going to come to body and say JSON. Our body is going to be a JSON body. So I'm going to create our JSON. So we're going to create the username. And let's say our username is going to be Jonathan. Then we're going to also create an email. This email is going to be, let's say, jonathan@company.com. Then the next thing is going to be our password. So I'm just going to say that the password is going to be password. After doing this, I'm going to pass in the URL. So I'm going to say localhost. The URL is going to be localhost 8000. And what did we call this route? So we called it sign up. So I'm going to say slash sign up. And after doing this, I'm going to send this. And I send, we see that our user has been created with a 201 created status code. So I'm going to test the route that is going to get all our users. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this get all users. And this is going to be a get request. So I'm going to create this request. And after creating this request, I'm going to come and specify the URL. So the URL is going to be localhost 8000. It's going to be slash users. Now, what I'm going to do in this case is to get all users. So this is going to return a list of all users. The next thing we're going to do is to set up our FastAPI-JWT authentication extension to help us to be able to create tokens and be able to verify users using those tokens. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is to be able to configure our FastAPI-JWT authentication extension. So as you see, we installed all requirements, but we haven't yet installed it. So I'm going to go ahead and install it. So I'm going to close this and stop our server with Control C. So I'm going to clear that and then install the extension. I'm going to say pip install. This is going to be FastAPI-JWT-Auth. And I'm going to install this tool and it's going to install in our virtual environment. Now I'm going to pip freeze this. So I'm going to freeze it in our requirements.txt file. This is going to be in our requirements.txt file, and fail to freeze it. So let me freeze it. And after freezing it, the next thing is going to be to configure our extension so that it works with our app. So to do that, I'm going to first minimize this. Then first thing I'm going to do is to import the necessary class that we need. So I'm going to say from FastAPI JWT Auth. I'm going to import the auth JWT class. And this class is going to give us access to all the methods that we shall need when creating tokens, verifying tokens, getting identities, and so on. I'm going to create a class that's going to have these settings, and then we shall be able to get this. So to do that, I'm going to come and create a simple class, a Pydantic class, which I'm going to call settings. And then this is going to also inherit from the base model. So I'm going to create this. It's going to inherit from the model. And after doing this, the only attribute we shall need here, and we can actually add other attributes, but the most important attribute we need is the auth JWT secret key. So we're going to be using the secrets module in Python to create this secret key, as you're going to see. So I'm going to do this by saying that our auth JWT secret key is going to be a string, and it's going to be equal to, so I'm going to open my Python console. So I'm going to say Python, and this is going to open our Python REPL, and we are going to be able to get secrets. So I'm going to say import secrets, and when I import secrets, I'm going to generate a secret. I'm going to say secrets dot token, and then this is going to return a random hexadecimal value, and this is what we shall use as a secret. However, in production, it is advised that you may use decouple to be able to add this to a .env file, but for this tutorial, I'm going to leave it public. I'm going to come and copy this. I'm going to copy this, and after copying it, I'll just come and paste. First minimize that, then I paste the secret key. So after pasting this secret key, we are going to load this config so that FastAPI works with it. So to do that, I'm going to just come and create a decorator. So I'm going to say at, it's going to be auth jwt.config, and this is going to load our configurations. So I'm going to create a simple function and I'm going to call it get config. And this is going to get our configurations from the class we just created, which is the settings class. Let me minimize my terminal. After doing this, we shall just return an instance of the settings class that's going to give us access to our configurations. We're going to say settings, just going to return settings. And after doing this, we pretty much have done what we need for us to be able to start generating JWT tokens. So the next route we are going to implement is one that helps us to generate JWT tokens, and we are also going to implement a route that's going to be used to verify users, to check whether users are the users they claim to be using the tokens. So to do that, I'm going to go and create a route, which is going to be our login route. So these are going to be logging in using this route. I'm going to create this route and say at app dot, this is going to be post, and then I pass in the route, which I'm going to call login. And in this case, what we're going to do is we need a status code and a response model. So in this case, we're not going to specify a response model. I'm going to just use a model for logging in. So to do this, I'm going to first create our view function. So let me call this login. And this is going to be using our model. However, we need a different model when logging in. So I'm going to create the different logo, the different model. I'm going to go up within our code and create the user login model. which is going to be the login model we are going to use specifically for logging in a user. We're going to create a class, and I'm going to call it user login. And let me first change this to a capital U. So it's going to be user login, and it's also going to inherit from base model. And this is going to have only two fields that we shall require to log in. And this is going to be our username, and this username is going to be a string. And then we're also going to require our password, and it's also going to be a string. Now for this video, we're not going to use any password hashing algorithm. Just like you saw with that as our password as a string in our dummy database, which is a list. We shall just be able to access it and then match it without any password hashing. So just like I did for the previous schema or the previous class or the model, I created a config class. I'm also going to do the same here. So I'm going to say class. This is going to be our config. Let me first organize this. So we need to come and use the schema extra. So I'm going to say schema extra. I'm going to do the same thing for just like I did for the above example. I'm going to just say example, and this is going to be a dictionary. So in this case, we shall only need a username. Let's say a username, let's say like Jonathan, and then a password. So pass in a password, and this is also going to be a password. After creating our user login model, the next thing is going to be to use this login model to log in our user. So to do this, I'm going to come and pass this within our login view function, and this is going to be user, and then we're going to say that we're going to use the user login model in this case. And the next thing we shall do is to also use the auth JWT class. But in this case, we shall need we shall use it to create tokens called JWT tokens. So to do this, I'm going to say we're going to pass it as authorize, and then we shall use the auth.jwt class. So I'm going to say auth.jwt, and in this case we're going to use what we call dependency injection. So basically dependency injection helps our external code, which is the one for the first API JWT auth, to work as intended with our code, which is for first API. So we do this by using the depends function. We're going to import that from first API. I'm going to go up and say depends. So this is going to be from first API. We are going to import depends. So I'm going to remove this and then say I'm going to import depends. And then I come back and we call this depends. So this is going to be a dependency injection. After we do this, the next thing is going to be to simply loop through all our users and check for the user that has that specific name and the specific password. So this is, I'm going to just say for you in users, and what you're going to do is to find out that user who has that username and the password. So I'm going to say if, I'm going to use two conditions. So I'm going to say if you username, so because the users are stored as dictionaries, is equal to, if is equal to the user. So in this case I'm going to say if the user is equal to the user, so we shall just say user dot username. So if the username is equal to the username in the schema, and then the password is also equal to the password in the schema, what we shall do is to actually just return the schema for now. However, what you need is to create JWTs. So I'm going to say this is going to be you, then we're going to say password, and we're going to say if password is equal to user dot password, or this user dot password, and what you're going to just return is the user. So I'm going to just return the user, I'm going to return you, and let's see how this is going to work. So let's remove this. So I'm going to save view, and this is supposed to just return the user object. So to do this, I'm going to go back to Insomnia, and then I'm going to create a new request. So our new request is going to be one for logging in or creating a token. Let's actually just call it creating an access token. So this is going to help us to generate an access token. I'm going to call this create an access token, and then it's going to be a post method. So I'm going to specify the method and then say create. So what you shall need is the body, which is going to be a JSON body. So I'm going to come and pass it as JSON. I'm we're going to come and say shall require our username, and our username in this case will be, let's say, Jonathan, and let's say our password be our password. So this is going to be in double quotes. After doing this, I'm not going to send this because we've let's check if our server is even still up. It's not up, so let me restart it. I'm going to restart our server. So I'm going to reload our server, and our server is going to start. So I'm going to minimize it. And after minimizing it, the next thing I'm going to do is to actually create a user again, since we are using an in-memory database. We need to create a user. So even if I were to get all users, we'll get an empty list of users. So I'm going to go to the create user route, and then I create a new user. So our user has been created, who is Jonathan, and has a password of password. So let's try to go to the one that creates an access token. So when we pass this on the body and we send, we are going to get, since we've forgotten to pass in the URL, so let me pass it in. This is going to be localhost 8000, and it should be /login. So when I send this, we see that our user has been created. However, he has been created with a status code of 200. Let's go and fix that. So I'm going to just come, and when we pass this, we actually not creating the user. We just return the user. So what we want is to actually create an access token for this user using our credentials. So to do this, what I'm going to do is to come and remove this. So what I'm going to do is to just say access token. So we're going to create the access token. This access token is going to be, we're going to use our auth JWT class. So we're going to say going to be authorized. So just going to say going to be authorized, then dot. So this is going to create our token. So I'm going to just say create access token. Then we shall pass in the subject. Now the subject is the identity of that user that is going to be hidden within our JWT token. So that if we go to a protected route, we'll be able to get the user with a specific identity. So to do that, I'm going to say subject is going to be equal to, so let's just pass in the user with the username. So I'll just say subject is going to be, let's say, the user dot username. So we are storing a username of the currently logged in user. And after that, the next thing is going to be to return an exception in case this fails. So after doing this, we shall just actually return the access token. So I'm going to undo that, and we're going to return the access token if this is a success. And if it's a failure, we shall return an exception. So to do this, I'm going to just return an access token. So I'm going to create a dictionary. So this is going to be access token, and then we're just simply going to return the access token. And then the next thing we're going to also do is to return an exception in case we have an invalid login. So in this case, what I'll do is to just raise an HTTP exception. So I'll say raise an HTTP exception, and this will be raised. So the thing first passing is the status code. So the status code in this case will be, let's pass in 401 error. So, and this, we're also going to specify the details of this exception as, let's say, invalid username password. So when I save this, we are going to try to test this. So let me go back to Insomnia. And when I go back to Insomnia, I'm going to create a new user since the server has reloaded and you're using a database that's not persistent. So I'm going to send this, and this is going to create a new user. So even when I check for the user, we see that our user is in the database. Now we're going to try to create an access token using these credentials. So when I send this, we're going to see that an access token has been created. Now let's go ahead and create a route that's going to be able to help to make us use an access token to access the currently logged in user. So to do that, I'm going to come and say, I'm going to just come and create a route. So I'm going to say app route. This is going to be slash. This is going to be app get. Sorry for that. End of code up with a flash. So I'm going to use app.get, and then this is going to just be, let's say, protected. And when this is protected, we are going to be able to pass in that JWT as an authorization header, and then we shall be able to get the identity of the logged in user. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create the function. In this case, it's going to be, let's say, get logged in user. So let's just call it get logged in user. And what this is going to do is to, since we're going to pass in our JWT as an authorization header, we shall need to pass this authorization header in our view function. So to do this, I'm going to create a parameter which I'll call authorize, and it's going to be of type of JWT. And then since we are using dependency injection, I'll just say depends and then call the depends function here. The next thing is going to be to basically protect this route with JWT required. So to do this, I'll use a try catch block. So try except block. So I'll say try. And then after doing this, the next thing I'm going to do is to protect this by saying at authorize then JWT required. So every time I'll protect a route, I'll use authorize.jwt required to protect it. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to except in case we do not match these in case the JWT does not match what we have as a logged in user, we're supposed to return an exception. So to do that, I'm going to say except. So I'm going to accept an exception. Let me just say except an exception as E, and then I'll raise an HTTP exception error. So I'm going to import that from FastAPI. So I'm just going to go to FastAPI and say FastAPI. I'm going to import the HTTP exception. So we can be able to specify the status code of this HTTP exception. I'm going to come and say, so in this case, I'll just say raise, then I'll raise an HTTP exception. And then this HTTP exception is going to have a status code. This status code is going to be, let's say, so we're going to import status from FastAPI. So I'll also import status. So I'll say status. And then I'm going to come just down this side and say the status is going to be status. But this is going to be HTTP 100 unauthorized. And then we shall specify the detail as invalid. So we shall say invalid token. Let's just say invalid token for now. I'll just say invalid in token. And then the next thing is to return the current user's identity. So to do that, I'm just going to use create a variable called the current user. So this is going to be the current user. And then since the current user will be stored in our JWT, we can be able to access the current user using the JWT. So to do that, I'll just say current user is going to be the authorize dot this is going to be get JWT subject. And this helps us to get the subject that we passed in JWT, that is the current user who is logged in. So we're going to just return the current user's name. So we'll just say current user, then this is going to be current user. So let's try to test this. So I'm going to go back to Insomnia and try to create a new JWT and then access a protected route. So to do that, I'm going to go to Insomnia. I'm going to create a new request, which I'm going to call protected route. So this is going to be our protected route, and it's going to be a GET request. So I'm going to create. And after doing this, the next thing is going to be to pass in the URL. So I'm going to pass in the URL. So this is going to be localhost. Then I'm going to call this 8000 slash protected. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to create a JWT and then pass it as our authorization header. So to do this, since we are having a dummy database, whenever we reload, our data is lost. I'm just going to go back and create a new user. So when I create this new user, the user has been created. Even when we try to we get a list that has a user. I'm going to create an access token for this user and be able to create this token. So I'm going to copy this token. I'm going to copy this token with Ctrl C and then go back to the protected route. So let me actually rename this. I'm going to rename this to say protected routes. And when I go back here, I'm going to go to the header and then I'll go to the new header. I pass in the key. It's going to be our authorization. So this is going to be an authorization header. And then after specifying this is our authorization header, I'm going to pass in the token as bearer, and then I'm going to pass in the value of the token. So I'm going to say space and then I paste in the token. And when I send this, it's going to give us the current user's identity. So let me send this, and this is going to return our current user as Jonathan. So we've been able to see that when you have a JWT, we store the subject as the user who is currently logged in. So that JWT specifically contains the information of the currently logged in user. And whenever we are to access a protected route, we use our JWT to access that user's identity. So let's go ahead and create refresh tokens. I need to go back to our code. Now we need to ask ourselves, what are refresh tokens? So there may be instances in which we need to create a new access token, and when we need a refresh token. So this refresh token helps us to create new access tokens. So to do that, we're going to go back to our login function, and every time we shall be able to log in, we shall be able to create a new access token with a refresh token. So to do that, it's going to be as simple as adding this line. Just going to say refresh token is going to be equal to authorize, and then we're going to say create refresh token. We're just going to pass in the subject. So our subject is going to be the user dot username. So after doing this, when I save, we're going to test our route again, hoping that our server is still running. We're going to Our server is still running, so I'm going to go back to Insomnia first. Make this minimize. So I'm going to go back to Insomnia, and what I'm going to do is to our server is reloaded, so I'm going to create a new user. I'm going to go back to the JSON and send. Created a new user. So even when I get a new user, we get a list of users, and I'm going to go and create an access token. So in this case, we're going to be creating an access token as well as a refresh token. I'm going to send this. So this is returning an access token. Let's try to return a refresh token as well. So I forgot to include it here. So I'm just going to say we're going to return the access token and then the refresh token as well. So I'll pass it that. I'll include it and save. So we're going to log in again. So I'm going to create an access token. So I'm going to create a user and then create an access token. So this brings an access token as well as a refresh token. I'm going to rename this refresh token. That is going to be creating both our refresh token and our access token. Now there may be instances in which we may need to create a new token. So let's go ahead and implement a route that's going to enable us to create a new token. So I'm going to go back to our code and I'll create a new route. So I'm going to create a new route. So I'm going to say app.get, and then I'll just say this is going to be a new token. So I just call this new token. So let's call it new token. This is basically going to help us to create a new token with our refresh token. So after this, what I'm going to do is to come and create a view function. This is going to be create new token. So I'm going to pass in our authorize because we shall need to pass in the JWT, which is the text token. So I will pass in authorize header. So I'm going to use authorize, and then this will be of the type of JWT class, and shall also this depends. So we shall call depends here. And after calling depends, we are going to be able to create our new access token. So the first thing is going to be to be able to protect this route. So I'm going to just simply copy this code and paste it down here. So it's going to work the same. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to now in this case we require a token, a refresh token. I'm going to change this to auth authorize, and this is going to be refresh token required. So going to be refresh. So this is going to be JWT dot fresh. This is going to be our refresh token required. So in this case, is going to be JWT refresh token required, because in this case, we shall be required to get our JWT refresh token. So when we get it, the one thing we shall need to do is to just create a new token. So after that, we are going to just create a new token. So we may just create a new token by saying that our access token in this case is going to be equal to, let's say, authorize dot. So this is going to be create access token. So the first thing we're going to pass in is the subject. So the subject is going to be equal to. So we are going to be required to pass in the current user as our subject. I'm going to return the current user. So I'm going to say current user. So since the current user is going to be within the JWT we're going to pass in, so we're going to just say it's going to be authorized dot get JWT subject. So this will give us access to the current logged in user, and then we shall use that as our subject when we create a new token. So we're going to say this is going to be our current user. So we're going to just return this access token. So I'll just say return. So this will be new access token, and then the value is going to be our access token. So I'll just say access token. So let's try to see this. I'm going to save and go back to our insomnia. So I'm going to create a new route, which we are going to call create. I'm going to call this create a new access token. So after doing this, we are going to use our refresh token to access our new access token. So I'm going to create this request and say this is going to be slash new token. So I'm going to say localhost host 8000 slash new token. So the first thing I'll need is a refresh token that I'm going to pass in within this route, or to pass in within the headers, the authorization header. So you're going to go to create a new user. Since we've reloaded, you're going to create a new user, then log in to access the refresh token. So when I send this, I'm going to access the refresh token and I'll copy this. After copying this, I'm going to use this within our code. So I'm going to come to our new access token. So I'm going to go to the headers and then I pass in the authorization. The authorization header, and then I'll give it the token bearer space, then the token. I'm going to send this, and this should generate for us a new access token, just like we see here. Now, in this case, we've been able to create a new access token using a refresh token. In the next example, we're going to be creating a freshness token. So a freshness token is one that is required each time we'll have to log in a user in case we need them to log in. Take an example. When you're deleting a repository on GitHub, you need to log in with your password. So that's when we create a freshness token. So let's go ahead and see an example where we can create a freshness token. So I'm going to go back to our code and we're going to create a freshness token. So I'm going to implement a route. Now let's go ahead and implement that route that's going to create a freshness token. So to do that, I'm going to come and create that route. So I'm going to say at app dot. So this is going to be post, and then this is going to be our fresh login. This is going to be different from the login we created earlier, and it's going to create for us a very fresh token. So let's go ahead and create this. So I'm going to say it's going to be refresh token, and this is going to be our fresh. So we're going to call this route fresh login. And now we're going to create our view function. So this is going to be our fresh token, or we can actually call it get fresh token. So anyway, let me just call it fresh login. So I'm going to call this fresh login. What I'll pass in first is our user. So I'm going to pass in our user. This is going to be of type user. And then we're also going to pass in our authorize. It's going to be of type auth-JWT. So in this case, we are going to use some dependency injection. So this is going to be, we're going to call that depends function. And after doing this, the next thing is going to be to get this user and be able to log in and create a new token. So to do that, it's not going to be so different from the login. However, it's going to work in a way that's going to create a token that is fresh. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the login where we did, and I'm going to just copy this. So I'm just going to copy this code and then come right here where we have our post and then post this. So what this is going to do is to look for that user and verify if the password and the username match. And if they match, what we'll need is to create our new token. So I'm going to remove this. And then what I'll do is to actually come and rename this to our fresh token. So I'm going to call this fresh token. So I'm going to call this fresh token. And after this, we are going to create a new access token, and we are going to just pass in one parameter. After specifying the subject, we shall just pass in our fresh parameter. So we have a variable called fresh. When we set it to true, it's going to create a fresh JWT that we're going to use to access those routes that are protected and need a fresh token. So to do that, instead of returning an access and the refresh token, I'm going to remove this and we shall only return the fresh token. So I'm going to just say this is going to return our fresh token. Let me correct this. So this is going to be our fresh token. Close this. Then I also say this is going to be our fresh token. And then once we are done doing this, we can also raise an error in case we did not pass this. So I may just say raise and actually do this just inside here. So I can raise an HTTP exception. So say HTTP raise an HTTP exception, which is going to have a status of, let's say, the status in this case will be equal to, let's say, h status. Shall use the status codes from FastAPI. This is going to be status HTTP and authorized, and then the detail of this is going to be valid username or password. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to create a route that requires us to have a refresh token so that we can log in with that refresh token. So to do that, I'm going to just create an extra route. So I'm going to call this app.get. Then I'll specify the route to be I'll just say fresh. Let's say fresh. Let's just call this fresh URL. Let me just call it fresh URL, and I'll just say get user. So I'll just say get. Just call it get user, and then after this, I'll pass in the authorize because you need an authorization here that is going to take in the freshness token. So I'll say this is going to be authorized, and then it's going to be auth-JWT, which is going to depend. So pass in the dependency injection. After this, what you're going to do is to just be able to just like we are trying to protect the other routes, we're going to also protect this route. I'm just going to say try. I'm going to use try and except. So I'm going to say try. In this case, I'll say authorize. But in this case, we need to get to protect this. So we are going to say this is going to be fresh JWT required since we require a freshness token in this case. So after doing that, the next thing is going to be to accept. I'm going to accept an exception as E. After doing this, we will just raise an HTTP exception status. So we shall just pass in HTTP 401 and unauthorized, and then the detail just say invalid token. So let's just do that. So pass it in as invalid token. And after doing that, the next thing is going to be to get the current user's identity. So what we're going to do is to just say current user going to be equal to, in this case, it's going to be authorize dot get JWT subject. And after doing this, we are going to return the current user. So I'm going to say return. In this case, it's going to be current user. Then we're going to write the current user. So let me stop and explain what I did here. So in this route, we are required to create a fresh token that is going to be used to be accessed when we need it. For example, when we need to re-log in, when a person is currently logged in, but we need them to verify if they are the owners of what they are going to delete. For example, a GitHub. And we can be able to get these users and return their current identity using only their fresh token they have created. So let's save and try to see this. So I'm going to save. After doing this, I'm going to go back to my Insomnia. So Insomnia. When I go back to Insomnia, I am going to create a new route, and I'm going to call this get freshness token. So I'll just say get freshness token. So I'm going to call this a post method, then create this request. So I'm going to say localhost 8000 slash, this is going to be fresh token. So I'm going to say slash fresh login. It's actually fresh login. Now what shall need is the body. So we need to create a user. So I'm going to go to the route that creates a user and then send. So I'm going to create a new user. So we have a user with Jonathan and password of password. After doing this, I'm going to just come simply and go to get fresh token, freshness token. So I'll just have to pass in the body as JSON. So this is going to be our username. The username is going to be Jonathan, and then our password. In this case, let's pass in our password. Then our password is going to be the password. And after this, I'm going to be sending this. So we see that we have our we have an error here since we used the actually used the user model that we store in the database. So let's go and correct that. I'm going to go back to my code, and when I go back to my code, I'm going to specify that the user I want in this case is going to be the user from the login model. So this is going to be user login, and save this, hoping that our server is running. We have no error. So I'm going to go back. When I send this time, we are getting now, this is because our server is reloaded. Now let's create a user. So I'm going to create a user. When I create this user, I'm going to go back to getting a freshness token. And when I send, we get a new fresh token. Now this token is going to help us to access the route that is protected and only requires a freshness token. So to do this, I'm going to copy this fresh token. I'm going to access this route, which we call the fresh URL route. So we need to get our current user. So I'm going to create a new request. Then I'm going to call this get fresh user identity. So this is going to be getting our fresh user identity. And I'm going to create this. So I'm going to come and say this is going to be our localhost 8000, and then we're going to call this our fresh URL. So after doing this, I'm going to pass in the header, which is going to be our authorization header. So I'm going to say this is going to be authorization, and then we're going to pass in it's going to be bearer. Then we shall pass in the fresh token. And when we send this, we are going to get our current identity as the user who has been logged in. In this video, we have been able to create a simple REST API and use the FastAPI-JWT-Auth extension to carry out JWT authentication. We've looked at various concepts such as creating tokens, verifying users, as well as creating freshness tokens and refresh tokens. So if you've liked this video, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're new, where I'll be creating content like this. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.